All right, so what are some of the most overlooked expenses in retirement that people don't take a look at? Number one, actually, I'm going to say is the fun stuff. And I was guilty of this myself. I did it a little bit differently. I put a fund or a larger emergency fund off to the side and planned on using that for our travel in our first few, 4 or 5 years. Didn't end up doing a lot of that, or we're doing a lot of traveling, but we didn't end up with as much money in that emergency fund as we would have liked to have had. But the fun stuff, your hobbies, your travel, things like that. Now, I did put in some of my hobbies like golf. I put in my golf membership, but I didn't put in for travel, into my monthly budget. So that's kind of a mistake that I made that I'm going to have to figure out here in the future, and I might have to do some side hustle or something like that to make up a little bit more travel money as we get towards our older years. But go ahead and plan for the fun stuff. Put that in your budget somewhere. Number two is inflation. Okay, so over the past few years, we've seen inflation skyrocket. So really and truly, I think we all know what the effects of inflation are. We've seen them over the past couple of years, but we need to really go ahead and pay attention to that and put that in our budget. So if you've got a retirement plan and you're self-managing that plan, make sure you take a look at that, and you may need to budget in a little bit more inflation than what you have. Over the past 30 years, the average inflation rate year over year has been 2.27%. So that might not be a bad number to put in there. Number three is simple maintenance. If you're going to need a new roof on your house, if you have a 20-year roof that you put on 15 years ago and you're probably going to need one in the next 5 years, go ahead and put that money into your budget to spend 5 years from now. You're going to have tires on your car that you need. You may need to replace a car at some point. If you have a car that's 10 or 15 years old, you may plan on having to buy another car, hopefully a good, reliable used car. Don't pay those new car prices, and just simple maintenance on things. If your house has a wood exterior, you're going to need to paint your house, every so often. Things like that can really add up and be expensive. So you need to make sure that you have a good emergency fund. Make sure that you're insured and that you can continue to pay for that insurance. Being underinsured can really devastate your retirement plan. Okay, so make sure you got a good emergency fund. Make sure that you got good insurance, and build a little bit of flexibility into your retirement plan just in case those events happen. Number five is taxes. And taxes is kind of a double-edged sword, because if you're planning on making some income in retirement, if you're planning on a side hustle, part-time work, something like that, you may end up in a higher tax bracket than what your actual income from Social Security and your 401k or your pension is going to bring in. So you need to really take a look at that and figure out your taxes, because the more you make, the more taxes are going to be, put into play. And it also, like in my case, it wasn't so much taxes as my income is high enough that my health insurance payments are really high until I get on Medicare when I'm 65. So that was a big impact for me, was having to pay full costs for medical insurance. Okay, and I want to mention here just real quick, I'm not a professional, I'm not a financial advisor, so if you need professional advice, seek out a fiduciary fee-only financial advisor. Might be one of the wisest things you've ever done. And if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. We're putting out information 3 times a week. Number 6 is healthcare costs. Now, a single adult through retirement right now is expected to pay $165,000 between the time they retire, if they're 65 years old, and spend that in retirement. For a couple, it's $315,000. So that is including all of your healthcare premiums, your co-insurance, prescriptions, and everything. But you need to have that budgeted because it is going to cost you quite a bit of money in the long term. So like I said, for a single person, $165,000, for a couple, $315,000. Number 7 is long-term health care or assisted living. Now the average right now that a person who does have to go into long-term care is 28 months, where the median is 22 months. Now that can really add up because just for assisted living is almost $55,000 a year on average in the United States right now. So that can really add up pretty quick, and that's a couple of years, average that people are having to spend in assisted living who do have to go in. Now there's a lot of people who don't have to go into assisted living. So me personally, I'm going to go ahead and self-insure. I should have the assets that I can go ahead and do that. So you really need to take a look at long-term health care insurance and whether you need it or whether you don't. Okay, and this one I've talked about in multiple videos is forced retirement, and it's number 8. So if you're planning on working, most people, pre-retirees, plan on working till they're like 67, 68 years old. So if you're planning on working that late and your retirement plan is built to work until you're 67 or 68, well, guess what? When you hit 60, 62, somewhere around in there, things can happen that can force you into retirement. And some of those things can be health. They could be, losing your job that you've had for 20, 25 years and something happens to the company and you just lose your job. So I would always advise, just my personal advice is always to try to retire as early as you can in your retirement plan. My plan was to retire at 59 and a half. I retired at 60, so I was pretty close. But if you're planning on working until you're 68 and something happens when you're 60, you're going to lose 8 years there. So you might need to plan a little more aggressively because over half of Americans are having to retire earlier than they want to. And that's just a fact. It's right around half of people are retiring earlier than they want to. All right, number 9 is longevity. So in 1971, the expected life expectancy in 1971 was 70 years old. Well, guess what? In 2020, life expectancy was 80 years old. So we are just living longer, and that's a good thing, and we need to plan for that. The average retiree right now, this is the average retiree right now, is retiring for about 20 years. So that means a lot of people are stretching that out to 30 and even 40 years. If you get to live it into your hundreds, that could be a 40-year retirement. Or if you're in the fire movement and you retire in your 50s, you got to plan on longer than 20 years because that's the average is 20 years. So longevity, we're living longer. And number 10 is the sandwich generation. And I know that's kind of a strange way of putting it, but we have a lot of people who are between the ages of 40 and 65 who are having to help out their elderly parents and are having to help out their adult children who are over 25 years old. Yeah, over half of people in that 40 to 65 range, over half of them are having to help out their adult children regularly with living expenses. And 32%, let me see if I got that right. Yeah, 32% of people in that range are helping to support their elderly parents. So that's a lot of people. And if you're sandwiched in between those two, again, if you're planning on your retirement being later in life, it's 68 or 70, if you're planning on working that long, and you end up getting into this sandwich situation, you could be in trouble because the funds may not be there to support that retirement plan if something happens and you need to retire early. So hey, I hope you've gotten something out of this video, and if you have, please go ahead and reach down and hit that like button and watch this video next.